good morning. I'm Diane Smith. Welcome to Capitol Report Morning Update for Thursday, June 9th. It's a lot quieter here at the Capitol than it normally is in the Legislative Office Building at this hour of the morning, and that is because, of course, the session closed last night. The big thing happening right now is that Governor Malloy is about to hold a news availability at the state capitol in room 310, and we are going to bring you that live. But first, a quick update this morning. It's official. The 2011 legislative session is officially over. Here's a look at the House and Senate as the clock struck midnight last night.
Madam President, that concludes our business for this evening and for the session, and would move that we all convene downstairs in the House to hear the governor's address and move the Senate stand adjourned. Sine die.
Yes.
We have had an historic session. We have taken care of our financial matters, and we have turned a corner, and we are on to a new day. I move that we adjourn sine die.
And Governor Malloy is about to take questions from the media. We are keeping an eye on that, and we will go to that briefing live when it begins. Most of the major high-profile bills passed prior to yesterday's session, but there was a steady flurry of action on other bills leading up to midnight, many of them being revised with amendments. One bill, SB 1127, was amended and passed in both chambers last night to change a provision in one of the budget implementers, which called for closing highway rest stops in Willington. The amendment puts the Commission on Culture and Tourism in charge of maintaining that rest area. The Executive Director of Culture and Tourism will be our guest, coming up just a little bit later this morning. Also passed in the Senate and then the House last night, SB 1196, that's the annual land conveyance bill, which includes the Haddam land swap deal that has gained a lot of attention in the last few weeks. After a nearly 4-hour debate, the House gave final legislative approval to SB 210, banning bisphenol A in thermal paper store receipts beginning in 2015, and all of those bills now go to Governor Malloy for his signature. Meanwhile, the governor did address a joint convention of the General Assembly last night, just after midnight, praising the legislators for their work in this session.
We all know that there's one more step that needs to be taken for the budget to be locked in: the ratification of the agreement reached with the leaders of state employee unions. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people in this room when I say that I hope they ratify this agreement so that we can avoid going to a Plan B, which will mean large-scale and long-term layoffs. Upon ratification, Connecticut will have a state government that is sustainable. That means government will be able to provide the services that are needed, but at a lower cost to taxpayers. That said, this budget is nothing to celebrate. Not when it asks so much sacrifice from so many people. Let us hope that this is the last time we need to go down this road.
The General Assembly was successful in passing many governor-backed bills this session, including paid sick leave, the upgrade and expansion of the Yukon Health Center and new bioscience initiative, the decriminalization of less than a half ounce of marijuana, adding gender identity and gender expression to the state's anti-discrimination laws, and, of course, the implementation of a new 2-year state budget. And as far as that budget goes, all the governor needs is for the state employee union rank and file to ratify the $1.6 billion concession agreement. Union ratification would seal the deal when it comes to final action on the new budget, because it's not necessary for the legislature to come into special session to approve the contract for it to take effect. Those ratification votes, however, have not yet begun, and the new fiscal year begins 3 weeks from tomorrow. And we are waiting for the governor's news conference, but in the meanwhile, joining me now are Larry Dorman and Matt O'Connor. Larry is Public Affairs Coordinator of Council for AFSCME, and Matt is Communications Director, CSEA SEIU, Local 2001. And gentlemen, thanks for being with you.
Thanks.
We may have to interrupt at some point to go to the governor, but let's get started. It's clear now the pressure's really on you guys. The concession deal, the governor has said it's got to go through or it's going to be bad. And he's going to go to Plan B. So, Matt, let's start with you. What's the status of the votes now?
Well, we've begun the process of scheduling and holding some ratification votes among the 34 bargaining units that make up the 15 unions in the coalition. That will continue for the next 2 weeks. We're scheduled to have it wrapped up by June the 24th and hope to be able to announce the final results on Monday, June the 27th.
Okay, well, that would then be in time for the new fiscal year, Larry, which starts July 1st. So it sounds like the time frame is pretty good.
It is. As Matt said, the 24th wraps up the voting, and it's really been quite an intensive process. Once the tentative agreement was announced and distributed and published, and we've been doing meetings all around the state. We had a very successful meeting here at the Armory on Saturday the 5th, and actually got a standing ovation at the end. So I think the more we've had an opportunity to talk to members, the more we've had an opportunity to put information out, I think the more convinced they are that this really is a sensible agreement for these tough times.
Well, and as we talked about last time, there were a lot of myths and misunderstandings out there that as people are now getting to read it or to go to meetings are probably helping to calm some of their concerns. The governor turned up the heat again this week, Matt. He said that if the deal doesn't pass, he's now looking at 7,500 layoffs over the next couple of years. How did the union members respond to that?
Well, that's devastating to hear and to imagine, both to the state's workforce and to the public services that the 7,500 plus members provide to all residents and businesses here in Connecticut. It would change Connecticut as we know it. I think the governor actually used a phrase like that. I take him at his word. Our goal all along has been to prevent job losses, to keep layoffs from being part of the equation, and we were successful. We reached agreement with the governor to save money for taxpayers and be a part of solving the economic challenges that Connecticut faces without anyone having to lose their job. So our goal is to have this agreement ratified by the members of our unions so we can do exactly that, keep folks working. Mm-hmm.
Larry, one of the things that happened just a few days ago was what some members of the GOP called a bombshell, and that was a message from the Office of Fiscal Analysis saying that they can't verify all of the assumed savings in that deal. Therefore, they can't say it really is worth $1.6 billion. So what do you say to that?
I say consider the source. From the start, when we announced the framework of an agreement, and Senator McKinney and Representative Cafaro were holding a press conference decrying the possible protection of thousands of jobs, the Republican side, unfortunately, at least their leadership, have been playing the same sad music, which is we ought to be laying off more people, we ought to be causing more disruption of services. So that's my reaction. We have tried our best. Our members are making real sacrifice if they ratify this. We're asking a lot of them, but we think, as Matt said, it's very important, it's critically important to keep people working and to keep money flowing on Main Street. We don't represent hedge fund managers. We represent middle-class workers who have a decent standard, middle-class standard of living, and want to be able to spend what money, disposable income they have in their communities, and that's a good thing. So I can't worry about criticisms like that.
Well, Larry said consider the source, but which he was referring to the Republicans making comments. But, Matt, OFA, the Office of Fiscal Analysis, is a nonpartisan group, and they did issue a report that said they can't really get a handle on some of these assumed savings. So how do you reassure them, or how do you reassure everybody that it really is what it says it is?
Well, we've reminded our members that it's typical for OFA to begin to crunch the numbers after collective bargaining agreements are filed with both chambers of the General Assembly, which hasn't happened yet because the members of our unions haven't completed the ratification process. in 2009 when our coalition of unions reached agreement on cost savings with then Governor Rell. That was the process, and it's been that way for more than 2 decades. OFA not having all the information at this point isn't unusual at all, and in fact it would be unusual if they had more data than they do. I think it's important for everyone to remember that months were spent in discussions between representatives of our unions and the administration to achieve the cost savings framework that we did.
But and I agree with you that they will be getting more data as these frameworks are filled in, which is what you guys have been working on. On the other hand, some of the assumed savings are things that maybe can't be quantified. For instance, and I know that this has been criticized by a lot of conservatives and what have you, conservative talk show hosts, but the savings that are supposed to come from suggestions from employees on savings. How do you calculate that if those suggestions have yet to be made?
The fact is that you have to make a calculation, and to the best of the administration's ability, they've done that. I think the problem, again, is that those who want to criticize the deal, those who want to see it fall apart, and see chaos ensue, have referred to it as, the employee suggestion box. It's something much deeper and more consequential than that. We're talking about.
And I don't mean to take it lightly by calling it that
please.
Myself,
Yeah.
but I am curious as to how you find savings from there if those things have not been, forget enacted, but haven't even been brought up
Right.
yet.
But again, these numbers weren't simply pulled from the air. You have actuaries, you have consultants, and in the case of the technological savings moving to open source, those are quantifiable savings numbers. When you talk about actually looking at what the state does in terms of privatization and contracting out contracts for outside goods and services, which was rampant during Rowland and Rell administrations. There were no checks and balances on that process. Again, you can find quantifiable savings. When you talk about our health enhancement plan and the fact that state employees are going to be getting have incentives to get better and more preventive kinds of treatment, you're talking about savings that actuaries and others can quantify. So,
are you getting any negative reaction from the rank and file on that? Are there people saying, you're not going to tell me when I'm going to go get a colonoscopy, or you're not going to tell me that I have to, do this or that?
I think it would be really disingenuous of me, Diane, and we've been here a few times now, when you have an organization, a coalition of unions like CBAC representing 43,000 state employees, you're going to have people who object, who disagree, who dissent, and that's part of the democratic process. But again, what we've been finding is that as we get out to membership meetings, and I'm speaking because I've been to a bunch of them for my AFSCME unions, I don't want to speak for anybody else's, but and judging from what happened at the Armory, the more we talk, the more we explain it, the more we can provide details, the better the understanding that members have, and it makes us feel confident heading into the ratification process.
It's interesting. I ran into a woman yesterday at the hair salon, and she said to me, she talked to me about the union ratification process, and she said, and she's not a state employee. She's works for an insurance company. And she said, my brother's a state employee. He's a corrections officer, and I told him, you better pass that thing. She said, and I call him up every day, and I say, you better pass that thing. You better pass that thing. So, I think people are getting pressure from friends, neighbors, and family as well.
Well, that's sometimes the most effective pressure, isn't it? And quite frankly, I've heard from members who have said that talking to their neighbors, talking to folks they run into at church over the weekends, that they're hearing an awful lot of support for ratification and not a lot of sympathy for anyone who would be against it. I mean, after all, the members of our unions are preserving a quality health plan, retirement benefits that provide a stable pension in their golden years, and job security in the recovery from the worst economic crisis in 70 years, something that a lot of workers in not just the private sector, but other public sector workers simply don't have. And I think that as we're answering more members' questions and interacting with them, the comfort level, as Larry described, is being raised considerably, so that more and more folks recognize that, their sister's right. They better vote for this.
Larry, just one last question, and that is, since this is the last time we'll be seeing you guys during this cycle of the show. Thank you. We'll miss you too. How does this whole process that's happened this spring compare with what's happened in every other state, or at least in a majority of other states where they've had to deal with municipal and or state employees?
This has been a difficult ordeal, but it's